Hi friends and welcome back to Millennial Mixtape, the channel where we rewind the music that raised us. From the late 80s through the early 2000s. Picture this, it's 2001, you're watching TRL or maybe you're flipping through channels and landing on Bet. And suddenly, there's this singer you've never heard of before, strutting through a shopping spree, dropping thousands of dollars that definitely weren't hers, looking absolutely unbothered about it, and singing a hook so catchy it almost felt like a joke. Except it wasn't a joke. The voice behind it was completely real. That singer was Blu Cantrell. That song was Hit 'Em Up Style. And within weeks, it was everywhere. Here's the thing though, by 2005 she was basically gone. And that's the part that doesn't make sense. Because the story of Blu Cantrell is not the story of an artist who got one lucky break and couldn't follow it up. She actually did follow it up. She got Grammy nominations, twice. She went to number 1 in the United Kingdom for 4 straight weeks. Her second album was reviewed well enough to earn a Grammy nod for Best R&B Album. She had a voice that could go toe-to-toe with anyone working in that era. So what happened? Why does the world remember the song but struggle to remember the artist? That's what we're going to figure out today, because Blu Cantrell didn't disappear because nobody cared. She disappeared after people cared, after the radio played her, after the award shows noticed her, and somehow even all of that wasn't enough. Her real name is Tiffany Cobb. She was born on March 16, 1976, in Providence, Rhode Island, and she grew up in a household where music wasn't a hobby. It was the walls. Her mother, Susie Franco, was a former beauty queen, actress, and jazz vocalist who performed at clubs around Providence. And because she couldn't always afford a babysitter, young Tiffany and her 5 siblings would tag along. They were supposed to stay in the dressing room. Tiffany rarely did. She'd sneak out to the side of the stage and watch her mother work the room, studying it, absorbing it, filing it away. She started singing before she could barely talk, by her own account. As a little girl, she even auditioned for the lead role in a production of Annie, making it all the way to the final 10 before losing the part. The reason? She didn't have the right look. She told the BBC's Top of the Pops it left her frightened of performing for a while, but not for long. After high school, she moved to New York City at 17 to chase the dream. And for years, New York gave her nothing back. She worked in a bar, a beauty salon, a department store. By 1995, she was nearly evicted and barely had enough money to eat. It was a low that would have convinced most people to quit. She didn't quit. Then came 2000, and a moment that sounds like it was written for a movie. Her sister, Kelly, had been in a serious car crash and was in a coma in Atlanta. The whole family rushed there. And while Tiffany was walking through a hotel lobby, a stranger approached her, told her she looked like a singer, and brought her to a company called Red Zone Entertainment. I guess it was a pickup line, she later told Polestar, but he brought me to Red Zone and they signed me after they heard me sing. That company was run by a producer who went by Tricky Stewart. The same Tricky Stewart who would later produce Rihanna's Umbrella and Beyond. He originally wanted her for a girl group he was building, but after one session, he changed the plan. He offered to develop her as a solo artist. She moved to Atlanta, began recording demos, and started doing background vocal work for the kind of names you don't say no to. Puff Daddy, Gerald Levert, Faith Evans. Keep that in mind because one of the things that gets lost in the one-hit wonder conversation is that Blu Cantrell wasn't plucked off the street and handed a hit song. She had been grinding for years. She had the range, she had the experience, she had an alto that could fill a room without effort. When Tricky brought her to Arista Records president Antonio L.A. Reid, Reid asked her to perform a cappella on the spot. She sang an original called Till I'm Gone, just her voice, no track, no production to hide behind. Reid signed her immediately. Then reportedly 10 other labels found out about her, and what followed was an 11-hour bidding war. L.A. Reid outbid them all. According to Cantrell herself, he also threw in a Ferrari, which is absolutely not how most music contracts work, but if anyone could make that happen, it was L.A. Reid. The detail tells you something about how much heat surrounded her before a single note of her debut album was publicly available. The industry believed in her, the machine was ready to move. Now here's where the story gets interesting, because the song that launched Blu Cantrell into orbit wasn't exactly what you'd expect to become a genre-defining moment. Hit 'Em Up Style was written and produced by Dallas Austin, the same Dallas Austin behind TLC's Creep, Monica's Just One of Them Days, and a string of other hits built around women's voices doing exactly what the industry usually tried to soften. In a 2019 interview with Billboard, Austin described how the song came to him. He was watching a Merry Melodies cartoon, heard the opening credit sound, and thought, what if I could make a song that sounded just like that, but updated? He wrote it, convinced himself nobody would like it, and played it for Blu Cantrell anyway. She told him it was the most creative song she'd heard in a long time. He took that. The song samples Frank Sinatra's 1962 track, The Boys' Night Out, which is either the most random or most perfect creative choice, depending on your mood. And it sets up a scenario that is technically about revenge, but plays more like a heist comedy. Your man cheated? Spend his money. The bank, the jewelry store, all of it. With a cheerful brass hook and an alto that sounds like she's genuinely having the time of her life. It was released in 2001 and it moved fast. It climbed to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, where it sat for 2 weeks. It hit number 1 on the mainstream top 40. It cracked the top 10 in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the Netherlands. And Cantrell described it perfectly. I couldn't categorize hit 'em up style, and I don't think anyone could. That's why it was being played on so many different radio stations. It ended up loved by 70-year-olds to 5-year-olds all over the world. That's the magic of it, and also quietly the problem with it. Because hit 'em up style is a concept song. It has a personality so specific, so defined, that it almost functions as a character more than a musical style. And when your debut single is that vivid, that memeable before memes existed as we know them, it creates a ceiling over everything that follows. Her debut album, So Blue, dropped in July 2001 and debuted at number 8 on the Billboard 200. It went gold. She earned 2 Grammy nominations, Best Female R&B Vocal Performance and Best R&B Album. She got an American Music Award nomination for Favorite New Soul R&B Artist. The machinery of a major career was clicking into place. So here's what you probably don't remember, what the second single from So Blue was, or the third, because neither of them became a cultural moment. The album performed, the follow-up singles didn't stick the same way. And that's because the song had set up an impossible standard, not just commercially, but conceptually. The public knew who the hit 'em up style girl was. They were less sure who Blu Cantrell, the artist, was. In 2003, Blu Cantrell came back with her second album, Bittersweet, and released a single called Breathe. The original album version was produced and co-written by Ivan Matthias and Andrea Martin, and it used a cleverly reworked sample from Dr. Dre's 1999 track, What's the Difference? But here's the detail that changed everything. For the single release, someone had the idea to add Sean Paul. And Sean Paul in 2003 was not just a featured artist. He was a force of nature. Get Busy had already spent weeks at number 1 on the Hot 100. He was coming off the back of what was arguably the hottest solo run anyone had in that year. Adding his name to a single wasn't just a feature. It was a category change. The result was one of the biggest international hits of that year. In the United Kingdom, Breathe debuted at number 1 on the UK singles chart on August 3, 2003. It stayed there for 4 consecutive weeks, replacing Daniel Bedingfield at the top and only being knocked off by an Elton John reissue. It became the 8th best-selling single in Britain for the entire year of 2003, selling 330,000 copies. It has since been certified 3 times platinum in the UK, a certification that as of March 2026 means it has surpassed 1.8 million combined sales and streams in that single country. It also hit number 1 in Ireland and Romania, made the top 10 across Norway, Germany, Denmark, Hungary, the Netherlands, Australia, and Switzerland. In much of the world, Breathe was the song of that summer. In the United States, Breathe peaked at number 70. Read that again. Number 70 in the United States for a song that was number 1 for a month in the United Kingdom. You want to know why that happened? Cantrell explained it herself clearly in a You Know I Got Soul interview. She talked about how L.A. Reid, her mentor, the man who signed her, the man who understood her, had been effectively sidelined as the Arista BMG structure shifted and eventually merged into what would become RCA Music Group. They basically took him out, she said. He was obsolete as president of BMG Arista, and that's when all of the chaos happened. There was a shuffle, and they weren't doing their work. And that's why there was no real promotion in the US for Breathe. Without Reid in the building advocating for her, nobody was steering the ship in the American market. Breathe became an international phenomenon organically, without label support, and the US office didn't catch up until it was already someone else's moment. Bittersweet peaked at number 37 on the Billboard 200, but it also earned a Grammy nomination for Best R&B Album. By this point, Cantrell had 3 Grammy nominations across 2 albums. She had consecutive, critically recognized projects. She had a #1 hit in the United Kingdom, and she was still somehow being described as a one-hit wonder. Here's the uncomfortable truth about early 2000s R&B. It was a brutal era to exist in without an airtight identity. Think about who was working in that same window. Beyoncé was transitioning from Destiny's Child to a solo career that would consume the next 2 decades. Alicia Keys had already claimed the piano-playing, soulful songwriter lane with much authority that nobody else could get near it. Ashanti owned the soft-voiced hook queen territory. Monica and Brandy were established names with loyal fan bases. Maya was cutting through the more dance-pop energy. Jennifer Lopez had celebrity and Latin crossover simultaneously. Christina Milian was bubbling up. Every one of those artists had a lane. A clear, marketable, radio-friendly lane that a label could describe in one sentence. Blu Cantrell's lane was harder to name. She could sing powerhouse R&B, she could do the catchy, funny revenge anthem, she could collaborate with Sean Paul and sound at home in a dancehall-influenced pop track. Her vocal influences ran from Billie Holiday and Sade to Whitney Houston and Prince. That range is extraordinary, but it made her genuinely difficult to market, which, in that era, before streaming let audiences self-sort, was a real commercial problem. When your identity is, she can do a lot of things, radio programmers don't know which pile to put you in, and when radio programmers don't know which pile to put you in, the next single doesn't get the call-outs, the slot, the rollout. She also had something else working against her. The label itself was disintegrating around her. By 2005, when her contract came up for renewal, Arista had merged with J Records under the newly formed RCA Music Group. She was in a position to re-sign, but L.A. Reid, her champion, the only person who had fully understood what she was gone. She chose not to stay. "I would have got my own lawyer," she said later, describing the way she felt the system had been stacked against her. She alleged that her publishing was taken, that money she should have seen never came to her, that the contract she signed had been structured against her interests from the start. These are her claims, not independently verified, but they track with what a lot of artists from that era describe when they talk about the business that was being done to them while they were focused on the music. She left Arista. She started touring internationally, intensively, as a free agent, playing the markets where Breathe had made her a genuine star. In 2007, she appeared in a stage play with Lisa Ray and Kenya Moore. In 2008, she appeared on NBC's Celebrity Circus and became the first celebrity eliminated. She announced a 3rd album in 2013. She reconfirmed it in 2016 to Fuse. As of today, that album has never come out. In September 2014, Blu Cantrell's name appeared in the news again, not for music. She was taken into police custody for a psychological evaluation after a public incident in Santa Monica. She never spoke publicly about what happened, and it's not our place to speculate. What it did was close a door on her already minimal public presence. Her Instagram went quiet in 2016. The last post, a New Year's graphic from December 31st of that year. About 7,000 followers still check in. She doesn't post. What we do know is that she's still out there. She still performs, primarily in Europe and Australia, where Breathe left a mark deep enough to still draw audiences. As recently as 2026, Songkick lists an upcoming show in Paris. There are occasional TikTok clips of recent live performances where, by all accounts, her voice still sounds like it always did. Powerful, unhurried, completely real. And here's one more detail that says something about what she left behind. When Shenseea, the Jamaican singer, sampled Hit 'Em Up Style for her 2025 song Boss Up, Cantrell approved the sample happily. Shenseea then reached out and asked if Cantrell would appear in the music video. Cantrell said no. She approved the work, she just didn't want to be in the frame. That's a very specific kind of artist behavior. Someone who knows the value of what they made, but has stepped back from the machinery of being known. So here's where we land. Blu Cantrell is not a one-hit wonder. That framing is lazy and it's wrong. She had 2 distinct major moments, each separated by 2 years, each recognized by Grammy voters, each leaving a mark on radio in multiple continents. Hit 'Em Up Style became a cultural touchstone that still gets covered, sampled, and referenced. Breathe just crossed 1.8 million combined UK sales and streams and earned a platinum certification in 2026. Over 20 years after it was released. But what Blu Cantrell never got was a sustained machine, a label that held her lane open, a clear identity that the industry could sell, a mentor who lasted long enough to shepherd her through the years when momentum is hardest to maintain. She had the voice, she had the timing, twice. She had the proof that audiences would show up for her in multiple countries and multiple formats. What she didn't have was an industry that knew what to do with her once L.A. Reid was gone. And maybe that's the realest thing you can say about early 2000s R&B. It produced a generation of genuinely talented artists, built them up fast, then moved on faster. Blu Cantrell was one of the best examples of what that era could lift up and what it could leave behind. So the next time Hit 'Em Up Style comes on and you instinctively start singing along, and you will, remember that the woman behind it could do a whole lot more than one song. She just never quite got the chance to show you all of it. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, did Hit 'Em Up Style or Breathe hit bigger where you were? Did you know at the time she was the same artist on both tracks? And what other early 2000s R&B artist do you think deserves this kind of closer look? And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick around. We'll be rewinding the music scene from the late 80s through the early 2000s. From pop to rock, hip-hop to country, one-hit wonders to industry disasters, and everything in between. Thanks for watching Millennial Mixtape. I'll catch you in the next one.